Hello, everyone. It's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland Reviewer. Welcome to the Wasteland, my weekly show where I take a deep dive into a particular film, and we are in the thick of it in 2024 as we're going through and getting through all the John Ford films. And thank you, my wonderful wife Jess, for coming up with that joke. But we're at peak John Ford, where he really started making a mark for himself with The Grapes of Wrath. And joining me for this episode is my friend, editor of SiftPop podcaster, all around movie fan and writer, Robert Bouffard. Robert, thank you so much for coming on.
Hello. Thank you for having me as always.
I didn't think you would come on for any of the John Ford films, but we got you down for Grapes of Wrath. And what we're here to talk about is this classic film based off of a classic novel. But for those who haven't tuned in to this show before, we have three segments. So we start with coming attractions for the weekend of March 29th. We have giant monsters fighting each other. We'll get to that in a minute. We have our feature film, The Grapes of Wrath, and of course, we have some recommendations to send you away with. Hopefully, one of those is The Grapes of Wrath. But, Robert, what film are you most excited for this last weekend of March, which was the first weekend of big movies this year?
It turns out, against all odds, it's Godzilla X Kong, the new empire. Just because there's not really much else going on this weekend, at least
Fair.
coming to theaters near where I live. So, um, yeah, Godzilla. I was talking about this recently with someone else. I'm just gonna kind of hold out hope that it'll be what you want with two giant monsters fighting each other or being on the same team in this case. And that like it doesn't focus too much on the humans as much as I like good emotion in the story. Just show me some cool, crazy monsters fighting and I'll be happy.
I really enjoy Godzilla minus one humans. I do not
Hmm.
enjoy MonsterVerse humans for the most part.
Exactly. Yeah,
So
yeah.
less of them. Monarch proved me wrong because you could just throw Kurt Russell into something and then yeah, I do want to spend time with him. But no, I I had fun with Godzilla versus Kong, the last one. And I'm really hoping this is mostly just them beating up other monsters. And, Kong has a mech glove and Stormbreaker, basically.
Yeah.
And Godzilla is super powered purple. And yeah, they're going to be fighting some other monsters, including another giant ape. So we'll see how it goes.
And
You'll
some ape
see.
children, I guess.
Yeah, there's a when Brian Tyree Henry was like, it's a little Kong, it's a mini Kong, and I'm like, that's called a Diddy Kong, thank you. Um, and they missed out on making that joke. Um, Probably don't own the rights to it, which is
Yeah,
probably why they
so
didn't. So sorry, Illumination has that right now at Universal. So, but yeah, I'm as excited as I'm gonna get for this. I'll be seeing this Saturday, and hopefully, bam, 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 bams all around. It's what
yes.
I'm expecting. Now, we do have a new Liam Neeson movie coming out this weekend. I was very tempted to pick that for mine, but I had to pick Steve Martin, a documentary in two pieces. When I found out Morgan Neville, who directed Won't You Be My Neighbor and
Mm.
Roadrunner, the Anthony Bourdain documentary, made this, and I'm like, this guy knows how to make a documentary about a celebrity. And I actually got to see this already thanks to Apple because it's coming out on Apple TV Plus. And this 3 hour and 13-minute combined documentary over the two parts blew me away. And even before that, I love Steve Martin so much. And it made me so happy that Only Murders in the Building exists, that I actually get to see more Steve Martin still,
Hmm.
outside of me going to watch him play banjos. And doing stand-up shows with Martin Short. And I really hope at some point they just call it the Steve Martin Short Show. Um,
100%. Yeah.
yeah, 100%. It just writes itself. But I was so excited for this documentary, and I'll say it lived up to my expectations. But I definitely recommend checking this out. But this was definitely the one out of everything that was coming out this weekend I was most excited about. There's a lot of low key films that are coming out because like there's not gonna be a ton of competition going out there against Kong. I'm pretty sure Frozen Empire is gonna get like demolished in its
I
second
hope so.
weekend. Yes, found out something about Robert here is Robert doesn't like Ghostbusters. So I did read both your Afterlife and Frozen Empire thoughts. You did not have a fun time, and I'm sorry.
No.
Um, it really didn't sound like a fun time at all. So, which also Frozen Empire is a stretch and also a misleading title to the movie.
Like
Um,
I said, it's like Age of Ultron, where it's like that age is like, I don't know, 5 days or something like that.
well, to be fair, at least Ultron was in most of
That too. That's fair. Yeah.
the. They wait until like 20 minutes left for any ice to show up.
Mhm.
Um, spoilers, but like I feel like you should probably have your expectations checked going into the movie. But no, Godzilla and Kong are definitely going to win this box office this weekend, and then I hope they lose to. Well, they're definitely not going to lose, but it would be nice to see Monkey Man make a lot of money the following weekend because God,
Yeah.
I'm so excited for that. But those are coming attractions for the last weekend of March. But here we are going to talk about 1940s The Grapes of Wrath, which did you read this in school? Maybe you did. I am sure you at least have heard of this John Steinbeck novel that actually came out in 1939. Like they took this and were like,
They were ready.
theater.
Yeah.
And some of the background on the film. So this is produced by Daryl Zanuck, who seems to always not get along with John Ford, except apparently with this film, because they both agreed they were not going to focus on the actual politics of the book,
Mm.
which is socialist and like anti-capitalist,
Have you
which
read the
they're like,
book?
I have, but it's been a long time.
Yeah.
They definitely trimmed out some stuff because there's
Okay.
definitely some like bit of like communist kind of ideas that slip in. Communist,
Right.
socialist,
Yeah, yeah.
people, certain people use that interchangeably today, and I'm sure they did back then too. But like John Ford obviously was not interested in portraying socialist ideas in his film, so they just kind of like pushed that to the side in this one. This is starring Henry Fonda, who's on quite a streak at this moment in time with John Ford having just done Young Mr. Lincoln, Drums Along the Mohawk, and this within like a year and a half of each other. So he definitely was making some films. John Carradine, who also popped up in a lot of those films, Jane Darwell and Shirley Mills, amongst others. This focuses on sharecroppers leaving Oklahoma because of the Dust Bowl and heading out to California. For those who don't watch South Park, there's a whole entire episode that spoofed Grapes of Wrath where they didn't have
Oh.
internet and they heard there's internet out in California. And of course, Randy is one of the main characters of the episodes, and we could just guess what Randy did when he found the internet. I love South Park. Now, this was has been since its release in the conversation for greatest film of all time. So like this has stood the test of time, and this was indeed one of the first 25 films added to the National Film Registry. So Library of Congress picked this among 24 other films in 1989 to start that archive and this registry. Supposedly, most of the first half of the book was faithfully adapted, but once they really got to like the like work areas and stuff like that, they took a lot of creative liberties with the film. Some of the more taboo elements of the book were taken out, including a woman who lost her child in pregnancy, then tried to feed grown men her milk to make sure they wouldn't starve. And they're
Oh
like,
my.
Uh, touching that one with a 10-foot pole. And also don't know if that would have got past like censors in 1940 anyway.
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah, that didn't get covered in the movie. The film is actually more optimistic than the book, which might be hard to believe as we talk about it. The ending of the book was a lot much dour, more dour than the ending of the film. Ford cut down on the political messaging, like I mentioned before, because like not really John Ford's politics. Yeah, this wasn't a Confederate sympathy film, so like
Right.
I've watched way too many on this journey through John Ford's filmography. Um, the score was actually based on the song Red River Valley, which they do actually sing in the film. And getting to the Academy Awards, this was a big one for the Academy, as this was a Best Picture nominee, losing out to Rebecca from Alfred Hitchcock. Ford won Best Director, which I'm pretty sure he's won like four. So like he's definitely up there in terms of being awarded as a director. Henry Fonda was nominated for Best Actor, but Jane Darwell, who played his mother, won Best Supporting Actress, which damn, she was so good in this. And this is also
Yeah.
nominated for screenplay, editing, and sound. So a lot of praise this film got. And oddly enough, was also nominated for Best Picture along with The Long Voyage Home, which was another John Ford film, which is next week's episode with Adam. So, spoiler for next week. But, Robert, what were your general thoughts on the film?
Obviously I'm not nearly as well versed in John Ford as you are and are becoming. It was only my fourth John Ford film. I've seen Liberty Valance, Stagecoach, and The Searchers a couple times. Excuse me. Westerns can be hit or miss for me, so I think for that reason, seeing John Ford make such a good movie, like I really liked Grapes of Wrath, it immediately became my favorite of his out of the four that I've seen. Um, there's definitely some stuff to talk about, like you were saying. But I was impressed in its commitment to the brutality of just
Mm-hmm.
what it puts the characters through. I've never read the book, so I honestly didn't even know what it was about when I hit play on the movie. So yeah, I was impressed. It was very different than, seeing John Wayne in a cowboy outfit like the other ones that I've seen him in. So, or the other ones from John Ford that I've seen. So, like I said, just very impressed, very well done. Maybe some nitpicks in that it can be a little bit slow at times. But beyond that, I thought it was great.
Yeah, as of right now, like this is a hard choice for me because I had just watched Stagecoach and like I'll say this now, The Searchers is one of my 25 favorite films of all time. So like I kind of know what I'm gonna be most likely gonna be my number one John Ford movie by the end of all this. But like
Yeah.
I this was the second time I watched this film and I was really blown away by this. And I feel like I gave this film my full attention the last time I watched it. And watching this again, like this wound up being my number one so far that I've
Oh
watched out
well.
of like the 40 some odd John Ford films that I've watched so far. This
So many.
is and more. I still have 40 more to go. And
Wow.
my last one will be the last show of 2024, literally.
Nice.
So, but this film is gorgeous. The cinematography is so impressive. There's a sequence where you have Henry Fonda's character in the old farmhouse and just the lighting, the shadows,
Oh yeah.
everything. It's incredible. And even just like it's interesting because it gives all the same kind of vibe as like Wizard of Oz and the Kansas scenes where it's like there's a tangible set, but then you have like the painting in the background, like the matte paintings and stuff like that. And it gives like
Mhm.
this mystical kind of feel to the old Midwest. And it's kind of like a fairy tale-esque thing, and then it all comes crashing down when you have to watch that one flashback of this family's home just being bulldozed. And that bulldozer does not stop. And you're just like, that whole sequence is so well shot, the framing, how it portrays the characters in it. It's such a impactful and poignant film throughout. Like there's heavy stuff this film is dealing with. This is poverty. There's like even just a little scene of the grandpa and the little girl, like the little kids going in and just like trying to buy a loaf of bread from a diner because they're that desperate for food and having to just see people dying and like they can't even afford to bury their dead
Mhm.
and like those kinds of things that hit so deeply. This must have been this book and this film must have been so impactful at this point in American history because like we were still in the Depression until basically World War II got us out of it because nothing fixed GDP like a war,
Yeah.
um, and war production. But like it's so poignant and like you see the influences of this like even in Interstellar the whole entire opening act of Interstellar is based off of this dust bowl and the effects of it and the desperation people are in. Obviously at this point they weren't looking up to like outer space to try to fix it. It's just trying to drive somewhere else and hope that you can find work. But yeah it's
Yeah,
just
you mentioned oh,
go ahead.
oh yeah, you mentioned the lighting and the shadows. Um, that's what I was most impressed with for a lot of the movie. Um, I enjoy watching black and white movies from this era just to see how, because you don't have color theory in your movies, obviously, when it's just
Mhm.
black and white. So a lot of the time, like Citizen Kane obviously revolutionized it, but you have some really impressive use of shadows and of light. So like
Mhm.
when they're out by the river when he runs into Casey, and
Mhm.
Casey is like leaning in and out of the shadows, like that's really haunting.
Mhm.
Um, and then that scene in the diner where the people just feel so bad for them that the woman is like, this is a two for a cent, even though it should be one for a nickel. Um,
Yeah,
it's like you said, it's just about how desolate these people feel, how desperate they are. Um, it's about as difficult a life as you can go through, and the movie doesn't pull its punches when depicting it.
absolutely not. And just some of like the plot points throughout, like the moment where they're at the one work camp and encampment, and the police show up and are trying to shoot this guy because he's trying to like drum up. That's like the littlest hints of like socialistic ideas, and he's trying to drum up trouble. Straight up shoots a woman,
Mhm.
just willy nilly shooting out at this guy. And that's devastating. You just see this woman in anguish on the ground. And you're just like, why'd she die? For no reason. And like that guy wasn't breaking any laws. He was just trying to uproot the establishment. And the layers of the complexities of what's going on here with this institutional structure of oppression through the police through the capitalistic needs of like these big wealthy men driving around in cars, nice looking cars, and just being like, well, if you go down the road, we could pay you like a dime a day or a dime a week or whatever the hell. And people are so desperate to find it. I found it so interesting, like the one nice camp is run by the government.
Right.
So it just and it is like reinforcing those socialistic ideas of like we could have social programs and thinking about the context this was during the New Deal, so like this is during FDR trying to turn things around in this country, and that's such a big and interesting idea of like you see that context put into this story. Obviously Ford and Zanuck wanted to like shirk most of it because they didn't want to get too much into the politics, but you'd still have to have some of it to give the context of how this is all playing out. And it really all comes down to the brutality of the police. That one scene, poor John Carradine's character. Kay's just getting bludgeoned. I'm just like, "Oh no." Like, and it's so interesting seeing Henry Fonda, who's like, he's the good germ from 12 Angry Men. He played Abraham Lincoln the year before, and now he's this desperate man who's wound up getting in trouble for killing people or assaulting people out of desperation. And that's why you have a Henry Fonda, because he brings so
Mhm.
much empathy to this character. And he is one of the great actors of this era. And getting to see him in these few John Ford films in a row, he just brings so much to the table here. And that character could easily be somebody that you're afraid of and that you don't have that kind of respect, but he brings so much to that role where you empathize for him.
Yeah, there's you definitely have a lot of empathy for that character, especially in like the scenes with his mom,
Mhm.
especially towards the end. I found it interesting when you were talking towards the beginning about how they're trying to skirt away from the politics and the socialism, when it very much is like espouses socialist ideas and it's anti-police, you know?
Yeah.
Um, like if you're gonna adapt his book, uh, from the looks of it at least, obviously I haven't read it, but like it seems like if you're gonna try to stay faithful, then you kind of just have to embrace it. And even though it doesn't go like full on Marxist or whatever,
Mhm.
it's still got those ideas, and it's just a stark difference from what I'm used to from the, it's only three other movies, but from the three other John Ford movies that I've seen, which is, the cowboys are the greatest, get rid of the natives, all that kind of stuff. I wanted to ask you, since you have more context and a deeper understanding of his filmography, one of the very first things I noticed watching the movie was uh the people were talking about they can't take our land. This is our land. My family was born and we've died here for generations. Um, is there any sense of irony there for you just watching that with uh John Ford making such jingoistic movies that slaughter Native Americans and treat it with utter contempt.
Well, what's so interesting is because he made so many films in his career so centered around the frontier and going out west. And those jet like their ancestors who got that land in the first place either took that land from other people or became like working on the land from people from those pioneers and frontiersmen that did take it from other people.
Mhm.
And it is a very interesting idea because like American society only likes to think back far enough into the past that's
Yeah,
convenient.
right.
And I do see the irony there. I doubt John Ford did in making those comments, but like that's the anti-bank perspective. It's the anti-capitalist perspective. And all those kinds of things. It's like, do I really do I know those people's family members killed Native Americans to take that land? They probably didn't. But somebody did for them to be able to get it.
Hmm.
And that's how it happened. And what's fascinating is my last episode was Drums Along the Mohawk, which is a Revolutionary War film set in the Western frontier, where it's Henry Fonda went out west. And, the British were riling up the Native Americans to like burn down their homes and stuff like
Hmm.
that. There's like one good guy Native American character in it, and the rest of them are savages, of course. Um, it was interesting is like this film kind of captures that lack of awareness of a lot of people of I for my wife always brings this quote up, and it might have been Lyndon B. Johnson talking about this. It's like if you pick the pot, like you can tell the poor while picking their pockets that somebody's stealing from them. and you
Hmm.
scapegoat other people, you can continue to pick their pockets. And what's very interesting in this film, there's no black characters, there's no Native American characters in this. It's more of a classist kind of issue. And we're dealing with like the poor of the most downtrodden poor people. And it's interesting that this film avoided any scapegoating in terms of
Right.
like whose fault it is. And I give all that credit to Steinbeck, who wrote the actual book, in terms of pointing the finger at capitalism and pointing the finger at the structures that allowed banks to like take these homes out from under people and stuff like that. You can't make this movie without some of the politics. Sure, they reined it back, but it's still prevalent there. And this is a very interesting film from a John Ford perspective because it does not feel like the politics of John Ford. And the
Right.
perspective, what he brings to the table is his incredible craft as a director. Because there's a couple of films 15 years into the past at this point that I've probably done them because I've been doing films from 1916 or so up to this point that you just see those glimpses of like there's some genius there in terms of
Hmm.
filmmaking. This film feels fully formed John Ford, and from a technical standpoint, it's incredible. From an emotional standpoint, there's just so much weight in it. And from an acting standpoint, there's so many great performances. This film is so well rounded and really just pulls you into all those elements that I feel like John Ford and Daryl Zanuck were hoping that like you'd be razzle dazzled by the family story, by the acting, that you won't pay that much attention to some of the politics floating around in the background. But the thing is, in 2024 context, you can't miss that. It's just
Right.
too
Yeah.
much right there for somebody like for us at this point in time to not see that.
And it like 2024, this takes place, they're leaving Oklahoma. We just saw Killers of the Flower Moon, which took place in Oklahoma. But I think you hit the nail on the head, right? Where uh if as we look at it from this context, we definitely see all the problems with it, the more meta problems with it. But the movie is so well crafted and so well done just as a singular piece. If you know, it's almost impossible to separate movies from their context sometimes. But if you were to just like, if you didn't know who John Ford was or anything like that, and you just sat down and watched this movie about the Dust Bowl Great Depression era, it would be extremely effective. And it is extremely effective like we've been saying, you buy into the characters, filmmaking is excellent. You buy into the emotion, and by the end, you're about as worn down as the characters are, because it's just an incredible feat all the way around.
And by the end, you get to that point where it's like our protagonist has to live in isolation on the run
Hmm.
because of and it isn't just about like he made conscious choices, but he did it out of passion and did it out of desperation. And you unfortunately see this man whose whole entire future is at risk now. And it gets down to the the industrial prison complex of America, right? Of like, what's prison supposed to be about?
Right,
Is it reform? And that's the thing. Everybody's like, oh, you escaped. And you're just like, no, I got paroled. Like, he's trying to do better.
right.
But these characters in this film, in today's context, probably wouldn't be white. Like, that's not
Yeah,
the poverty we see as much in modern America. It's like, you, this is a young man who has no other options. He's in so desperate to survive, winds up getting caught up in these things, put in prison, comes out, and then he's one step away from being right back in prison again. And honestly, in this situation, death. Like what he winds up doing later in the film, they'll kill him at this point. And it's such an interesting and horrible look at what this vicious cycle is of people impoverished, put in desperate situations. It's a tale as old as Les Mis. It's like
Right.
what did Jean Valjean do? Stole a loaf of bread? Literally stole bread to feed his family?
Hmm.
Like that's the context, and like that's where these people are at. But this family is trying to be so honorable about it. And but there's moments where they have to check their shame at the door to walk in to try to buy a loaf of bread. And just the journey of all these characters, and obviously the two biggest characters are Henry Fonda's character and his mother. And those moments with him and his mother have so much emotion there. She like Jane Darwell, just what she did with that character. Like I'm not surprised that has like best supporting actress written all over kind of performance of like there's so much depth to her. She brings a lot of the philosophy and the perspective of the film to the surface and is trying to help her son see this way of being able to live a good life. And unfortunately, this family gets fractured, and you have to see him go off on his own. And, just the shots of them driving off from these fields or him walking off into the hills, like it's just gorgeous. It just reinforces all of it. And sure, this film ends with a pretty hopeful place, but it really comes down to like it's not a happy ending. And it's not a happy ending for everybody, and there's going to be a lot of struggle for everyone moving forward.
Yeah, I didn't necessarily see it as a happy ending. I saw it as kind of like dramatic irony, right? Where the characters are like, things are behind us now. We're gonna go off to a better place when none of the evidence of what's come before has shown us that things are really gonna get better for them. They're just gonna have to keep scrounging and, going from place to place, trying to live a better life. Um, the place that they're sending off to, what is it? They're like only 10 days or only 20 days worth of work anyway. So it's not like it's a permanent job or anything like that. So yeah, I really didn't see it as too hopeful. I understand the characters trying to be hopeful after everything that they went through. But like I said, I think it's more dramatic irony than anything there.
Well, and at least on some level, the need of optimism to keep
Sure.
going.
Yeah.
And this family, the matriarch of this family realizing that they need to keep the hope alive to motivate and to keep driving them forward is more important at this moment because what are you going to do? Just give up? What else can you do? Keep moving forward and keep driving forward. And unfortunately, that was the life that so many people had to live at that time. And it's sad, it's devastating, but at the end of it, it's they're going to keep scraping, scrounging, doing all that they can to make sure that they have find something for their family.
Mhm.
But Robert, do you have anything else you want to add about Grapes of Wrath?
I think that pretty much covers it. Yeah, good John Ford movie. I'm glad that I watched it. Like I said, I wasn't necessarily expecting this out of him. So I'm glad that this happened to be the one that I was on for because I probably wouldn't have watched it otherwise. And
Yeah.
I'm glad that I got it.
Yeah, this is definitely there's a couple of different types of John Ford films, and obviously most people it feels like the same thing that like most people like Scorsese makes gangster movies.
Sure.
Yes, he's made gangster movies. He's made some of the best gangster movies, but he's made other things. And Grapes of Wrath is like one of those crowning achievements of something that he did that wasn't a Western. It wasn't cowboys and Native Americans. It's a unfortunate tale of poverty and resilience and just how far you have to go to keep surviving. But time for some recommendations for all of you. Now, Robert, what would you like to recommend to everybody?
What is a streaming service called Dropout? It's most of it is just like a bunch of comedy sketch shows, as well as some D&D stuff. I'm not really a D&D person, so I don't watch that. But I what I do watch on the service is a show called Game Changer. It's a game show where the tagline is that the game changes every show. There's the same host, and he always like has his contestants on who is like from a similar pool of all these comedians, and they play whatever game he wants to play that day. And a lot of times it turns into the contestants against the host. And it's always very funny. It's always very entertaining. There's a season going on right now. I think it's the sixth season. Dropout is very inexpensive because it's like one of the only good streaming services in the sense that they understand what their user base is and like what they can afford. So I think it's like $6 a month or something like that. And they don't want to bring it up because, like I said, they understand that. So even if you just want to get it for a month or two, there's plenty of stuff to watch, and you'll definitely have a good time watching it. So yeah, like I said, I've been watching Game Changer lately, and it's so much fun.
I had never heard of Dropout, but seems like a fun streaming service to kind of shake things up. That also
Yeah,
isn't $20 a month.
exactly.
Netflix. Now, what I always like to do is quick three recommendations. So one new film that I watched that I did appreciate quite a bit was Immaculate. Sydney Sweeney was so good in this. And did I love where it necessarily went and stuff like that? Not necessarily, but it had the atmosphere. It had the Sydney Sweeney about it. I think those elements at least made it work well enough. And there's some catacomb scenes that were really creepy and really unnerving. And I'm like, nope, I would never go to this place. Sure.
Mhm.
Um, my watch list film that I uh checked off my watch list was Investigation of a Citizen Above Suspicion. And this won Best International Film from Italy, scored by Ennio Morricone. I
There
was
it
sitting
is.
there watching this film and just being like, this is a weird score, and I love it. And I'm like, IMDb, I'm like, it is. Like, it's Morricone. Basically, the idea is it's this really biting, dark satire about a police detective who just got promoted, who winds up murdering his mistress and then trying to frame himself for it and trying to prove how above the law he is and like setting up evidence that point towards him, seeing how his colleagues ignore the evidence that point towards him. And it's such an interesting deconstruction of societal structures and power structures that can be corrupted. And I'm like, I did not expect I didn't expect going into watching this movie what I got, and I was pretty
Hmm.
blown away by it. It is actually streaming just on Amazon right now. So like it's on Prime. So if you have Prime, and then one film that I rewatched of mine, which will be the film for my movie club this month, is Cool Hand Luke.
Hmm.
This film I watched for the first time. It was the first film we watched in my cinema class in high school. And boy, do I remember all the Christ imagery
Hmm.
from all of those discussions, which there is a lot of very engaging and interesting religious allegory here, even to the point where this was an influence on like "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou," with like the guy with the dog and the reflective lenses, Boss Godfrey, God free,
Hmm.
and Paul Newman was such an amazing actor. George Kennedy is so much fun in this. But this is one of the ultimate 60s counter culture kind of films. It's all anti establishment, it's a religious allegory. Lucas Jackson, Christ figure. And it's an engaging and thrilling film. It's really well shot. It's a beautiful film. And it's definitely one that's like one of those classics that definitely holds up. So, and it really does capture that time period because late 60s, all about the anti establishment,
Hmm.
taking it to them, taking it to the man. But that is a wrap here on Welcome to the Wasteland, another episode of my journey through John Ford. Robert, thank you so much for coming on and joining me to discuss some movies.
Had fun as always.
And thank all of you out there for always tuning in and supporting your Wasteland Reviewer.